Hi, welcome back to another week of Behind and Beyond. I'm Allison, and this week I get to sit down with Pastor John Riley as we discuss the sermon from this past week. And John, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Good to be back.
Good to have you here. This is your first one, actually,
for the
series. Yeah, it's been a while.
It has
Did you
been
have a
a
good
while.
summer? How was does it feel like a long time ago already?
It feels forever ago.
Yeah, I know. It's like almost Christmas, basically. So
yeah, that's all. My son has like that rhythm to it, where it's like Monday, and he thinks logically gets down the road to where he's like, it's basically Friday by this point. He kind of pushes it ahead like that. He does that all the time.
Hey, so you started this weekend. I love the sermon. You started this weekend, though, by talking about all the things Gen X now considers, like we would now consider antiquated. Mm-hmm. So for an icebreaker to get us started, I thought if there's one thing you could bring back from your Gen X childhood today, what would it be?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I don't know if I'd bring it back, but it's definitely like a nostalgic thing that I think back on is mixtapes.
Yeah.
Like, so you think about today, it's so easy to just hear something with like the access that we have to millions of songs and hit a simple button that's just add to playlist and you create a playlist. But when I was a kid, there was like, you had to curate these things and it took patience. It took time.
Yeah.
You had to kind of get the blank cassette, put it in. And if you're trying to record something on the radio, you had to wait for a certain time. You knew the program that was coming on. You knew that song would be on there. You were hoping the DJ wasn't talking over the intro to the song. Then you have to hit the button. Or if somebody had the tape and you had the nice boombox where you had two cassette things, you could record it. So there's something nostalgic about like the mixtape thing, about the patience, about curating something. But then also, and this won't surprise you, there was something also interesting about curating and making one for somebody else.
Yeah.
Like as a gift, right? To be able to give it to.
Oh, you were like even a kid making little.
Like to give it to a friend, or I remember making one for my sister, or of course girls that you like at school. You make a mixtape for them, right? It's kind of the romantic thing to do because it's more than just like a collection of songs. It's kind of like I was thinking about you and I made this for you. So that's kind of mine. I think that's a little nostalgic.
So I'm a little bit younger than you, not like a lot, but I was kind of more the CD era. Yeah. But I do have my one strong memory about mixtapes is that my neighborhood, there were two boys that lived across the street from me, and we used to play radio DJs, and they had a Boys to Men mixtape, and that was the tape we'd always have to put in to their cassette player as we were playing DJ. Yeah, that's my main. Yeah, but Boys to Men on the
I saw a meme not too long ago that said Boys to Men were the only people who had the ability to make you feel like you went through a divorce with somebody that you held hands with once.
Yeah,
like they did have this like emotional. Yeah, so they were probably on some of my mixtapes too.
Yeah. I am a millennial, but I would say the thing that I would wish could come back is and I hope they are listening right now, Pizza Hut headquarters, because I think Pizza Hut's done a service of going all like pickup and delivery. I want the buffet back. And what I really want back is the Book It program.
Book It, yeah.
Yes. So if anyone is too young that's listening to this, you used to be able to, like, if you read like 5 books, you got these little jewel stickers on your pin.
On your badge.
Yes.
Yeah.
You had a badge with little jewel stickers after you read like 5 or 10 books. I can't remember. It was kind of low hanging fruit. It was like maybe $5. And then you got your free personal pan pizza.
Free pizza.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's not many Pizza Huts left.
Are there any that you can go in and sit down in?
Yeah, there's one by our house.
There is?
Yeah.
Do they still have the red cups?
I don't know. I haven't been in it in a while. But it still exists.
I'm going. I didn't know you could even go inside them anymore.
Oh yeah. It's like a traditional looking building. It's still there.
That's my birthday dinner this year. I'm
yeah,
going to be.
Come on down. We'll take you out to Pizza Hut.
Sitting down. I didn't know it even existed. So
yeah.
Look at that. My childhood's coming back right now, even as
all your dreams are
talking.
fulfilled.
Okay. Well, this week you taught on the Israelites turning to idols in the wilderness, and you set us up today. You kind of made it easy for me because you said you were going to talk about, in your sermon, you only had time to really talk about how to break the idols, but you wanted to talk about how to identify them. So wanted to give you space to talk about that here.
Yeah. So this was a live weekend. So depending on where everybody was, they saw different teachers.
Yeah.
But with those live weekends, we get in that room, we whiteboard together, we throw ideas on the board. And with something like idolatry, you can imagine there's so many good ideas that we could go after. I even had a few people after the services this weekend said we should do an entire series on idolatry, and that's real, like you could really do that, really go after it. But one great idea that somebody had brought up in that room was try to figure out how do we identify them, because they don't really like show up in our life and they have this easy to read name tag on them of like, this is an idol. So how do you identify them? And just didn't have enough space really to go through the identify. So I did start to kind of develop that idea and just didn't make it in. But I think that we can identify them. If I were to like simplify it really well, I think that we identify them by one, like where do we run? That's kind of a first one. Where do we run when we're stressed, when we're sad, when we're angry? Like what are the things that we run to? And I'm almost hesitant to even make a list, because I was hesitant throughout the entire sermon and development, because idols are so nuanced, they're so spread across. But I think for any of us to be able to just sit down and say, okay, when I get overwhelmed by life circumstances, where do I run first? That's an indicator that could be an idol. I think a second thing is, what do I rely on? Like the thing that brings me the most stability in my life. So what do I lean on the most whenever I do get into some of those stressful areas? The thing that I think if this was taken away from me, my life would be ruined, right? So that's another thing that we could think of. And I think another one is like, what do I react towards? So what are the areas in my life where I maybe overreact, where I have like a little bit too much anger or too much sadness towards those things? And probably an example I could give, I was thinking about this just because I'm a dad of teenagers, is our phones are a big piece of this. They're not inherently good or bad, but they are just what they are. And so when a kid gets stressed or sad, they'll go to their phone, right? If you take their phone away, their life is over. That's that kind of idea of like they've become such a central part of who they are that it can have a lot of repercussions. There's a book, I was trying to think of the author this morning. I didn't read all the way through the book, but there's a book called 3 Pieces of Glass, and it's all about loneliness and why we experience loneliness is because we all have these 3 really thin pieces of glass between us, and they are TV, windshields, and smartphones. And the whole premise of the book is that idea that these 3 pieces of glass have made us lonely because we don't interact with each other. We stay home, we get entertained. We don't.
We drive ourselves. Is that the windshield?
Yeah, but
like you're
driving.
Somewhere.
We can kind of create this bubble and go somewhere else. We don't have to be locked into our community as much. And then of course smartphones kind of take us into this false sense of being connected, even when we're not. So that's probably like a big example, not just for teenagers, but for all of us.
Yeah, for sure.
So like, where do I run? What do I rely on? And how do I react to certain things? And I think again, phones would be a big part of reaction because it's kind of the algorithm that feeds our fears and our thought process and all that stuff too.
Our dopamine.
yeah, dopamine as well. So I think that those are like the big identifiers that I would try to probably infuse into a message like this is, where do I run? What do I rely on? And how do I react to things?
Yeah.
Are probably identifiers that's at least where I'd start.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
So I was looking, kind of one of our anchor passages in this series is 1 Corinthians 10. And you started here in your sermon series in your sermon. And I thought it was just interesting. This idea of idolatry though, really kind of begins all the way in chapter 8 of 1 Corinthians. And so just to kind of like set it up, Paul is he's like dealing with this issue of food being sacrificed to idols and can they eat or not eat. And then he's kind of talking about his own freedom. And then he gets to this place in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Could you give us a little bit more context about like what's happening there with idols? How do you think we should read kind of this warning for us in chapter 10 in light of chapter 8 and 9?
Yeah, so it does. I did just kind of hit on that verse, but it really is like if you zoom out, it really is more of a theme all through 1 Corinthians, because in Corinth they were dealing with this a lot and it was so integrated into their culture. So in chapter 8, what he's talking about is this practice of almost every piece of meat that you could buy in the market had some sort of interaction with an idol or some sort of sacrifice in the temple first. And so the question for the Christians was, can we eat this? Like, can we just treat it as normal food, or since it's touched this evil thing, how does that interact with it? And so essentially he said, no, I mean, his answer is nuanced in the sense that he says yes and no to that question, where he says that there is freedom to do this because there's really only one true living God. These are all false gods. So there really is no impact on what is happening there. So yes, you could eat this meat with no problem. However, the nuance of it all is just because you have the freedom to do it doesn't mean it's wise to do it, and doesn't mean that it's loving to do it. Mm-hmm. So how is it going to impact other people is the big question that he's asking there. It's not just, do you have the freedom to do it? Okay, then run with it. But how does it impact other people with this call to love that God has given to us? And then chapter 9, he kind of throws himself out there as the example of this, saying that he has all this freedom in Christ, and he has freedom as an apostle, and yet he withholds his own rights. He lays down his own rights for the sake of other people because it's just not wise. It's not loving. He can do it, but it's not the best thing to do. So that's 8 and then 9. And then when he gets into 10, he kind of zooms out more to now include all of this wilderness, Exodus kind of language to it. And he continues to hit on idolatry a few times. And I think that the big example he's trying to give there is this idea that, like, if we look at them and you think of all that they experienced, crazy stuff. I mean, even rewind a little bit, the plagues that they get to watch, the Red Sea that's being parted, the cloud that's leading them, just manna, all this kind of stuff that they're experiencing. And yet their hearts still turn towards an idol.
Yeah.
So I think the warning there is that we can be wrapped all up in God's presence too. We can go to church, we can hear sermons, we can listen to podcasts, we can listen to worship music, we can do all that stuff and be so close to God's presence, and then our hearts can still turn, So I think that that's kind of the progression that he's thinking through there, is that just because you have freedom in something, it may not be wise, because you can take your freedom so far that you end up flirting with idolatry, like right on this line.
Yeah.
And that's what he's trying to caution them. A little later in 1 Corinthians 10, he says, flee from idolatry. Don't get close to the line just because you have freedom. Like, run as far away from it as possible.
Yeah.
That's kind of how he's talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because in chapter 8, he's kind of saying, okay, well, he's kind of giving 2 examples, like your weaker brother might struggle with food being sacrificed to idols. So for their sake, don't do it. Mm-hmm. So I think the reader could also think, well, I'm the stronger brother. So when the weaker brother's not around, I don't have to worry about this. But then you get to chapter, and there is freedom. And so Paul is saying there is freedom in Christ. You don't have to do it out of a sense of fear, I guess, that this is wrong. But then in chapter 10, he's kind of like, to your point, he lists 5 different examples. Like, I don't want you to be unaware, brothers, that our fathers were under the cloud. They passed through the sea. They ate the spiritual food. They had spiritual drink. He's giving all these examples of how present he was with them, and in very visible and very tangible ways. And yet they also fell very quickly into idolatry. And so I think there's just a caution there. Even one might think that they are the stronger brother.
And
yet,
we always read our way into the text that way. Like, I'm the stronger one.
Right.
Yeah. We always
so
read our way.
the strong one, will for sure be kind to the weaker brother. But I think there's a sense in chapter 10 that you might not be as strong as you think you are. Yeah. Look, the Israelites are here as an example for you, that even though they had all these manifestations of my presence, they still succumbed to idolatry. Yeah. And so beware, believer.
Yeah. We always read ourselves into the text as we're the
hero,
as though we're the exception.
Yes.
Almost.
Yeah.
And I think that's his big warning is no, if anybody had a chance to beat idolatry, it's the people who are following God, that they can see him clearly, and yet look, their heart's turned.
Yeah.
And so you're not an exception to the rule. You have to be aware. You have to be watchful. Paul talks about that, I think, in 2 Corinthians, where he talks about being watchful of being able to stand firm in the faith.
Yeah.
Right. So just always be not on edge, but be ready.
Mindful, sober-minded.
Yeah.
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 I did think it was continuing with the Exodus. I thought it was interesting when you were talking about, I guess I hadn't thought about how long Moses had been on the mountain. I think I'd always kind of been like, those dumb Israelites, why are they making an idol immediately?
Yeah.
But I hadn't thought about that. Like maybe the fear that's happening there, like Moses, their leader, they're in the middle of nowhere. Moses, their leader, is going up on this mountain. Is he coming back down? Is he not coming back down? What's happening? Aaron suddenly is like, what am I going to do with all these people? And so I felt like I had this new sense of like compassion for him a little bit, in the sense that he goes and makes this idol, but I could see him kind of defaulting to just learned behavior. This is what he knew he didn't know what to do. And he just went and did what he thought he was supposed to do. And maybe he thought, still it's like God, but I'm just going to give them like a picture of God, and this will kind of be helpful. So I'm curious what your thoughts on that are. And then with that also, I think with idols, do you think any of them in our lives could be inherited or family or like cultural, that maybe we don't even, it's hard to even see because we're so raised up in them? And how do we kind of identify that?
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting, like reading back through this for this series, because you do get a really interesting lens on it, that there's a lot of complicated things happening, that they are just a few months out of Egypt. So everything that they know is Egyptian slave culture. Mm-hmm. And then Aaron and then Moses goes up on the mountain. Aaron kind of becomes in charge. They don't know, did Moses go up there and die? Like, did God just take him away? Like, they have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And
I guess I always pictured they'd just like see him up there.
You could kind of see him in the distance, writing, doing some stuff. Yeah. No, he just goes up and they don't know what's happening. So there's a long time and they start to get a bit restless. And I do have a little bit more of a heart for Aaron, I think, this time around, because digging into it a little deeper, it does, like the way that the language talks about it, it's like the people came against him. They like kind of cornered him and said, solve this problem for us. And so I think he does what he saw, what he kind of knew, because he creates the golden calf, but then he has this line where he says, today or tonight we'll have a feast to the Lord. So he's still trying to point to God. I think he's just saying that this is a representation of God.
Yeah.
Because that's what he knew from slavery in Egypt.
Right.
So you do have a little bit of a heart for him, but then a little bit later, when Moses comes down from the mountain, he comes down with the original 10 commandments. He's immediately mad at everybody. He smashes them on the ground, and then he goes and he confronts Aaron, and Aaron doesn't really take responsibility for it, because it says in the text that Aaron is the one who actually took the gold and carved the calf. He's the one who did it. But then later when Moses confronts him, he says, well, we just threw the gold in the fire and it just kind of came out that way. It was like, so there's a little bit of responsibility on Aaron too. He's not completely innocent, but I definitely have more of a heart for him, I think, this time around reading it, because they were carrying so much stuff out of Egypt, and they had not even received really the law of God yet to know what was right or wrong. So this is a moment where God gets to teach them this is wrong. It's kind of how that works out. To that end, your other question was the idea of, are there things we can inherit? And I think that there are clearly some things that we can inherit from culture, from our families. I think that a lot of us will inherit, like, for example, the idol of achievement. Like if your family was very like results oriented driven, your grades really mattered, your performance really mattered, you can grow up with this idol of my worth and my value is wrapped up in achievement. And so you get into a job and you work like crazy and you sacrifice your family on that altar instead. And so the worship of achievement can be a huge one. Comfort could be another one. I brought that up a few times this weekend as well, that if you grow up in a household where confrontation was something that nobody wanted to deal with, so we just didn't deal with problems, we swept them under the rug, we never talked about them, you bring that into your own adult life and even into your own marriage, where maybe you have somebody who in their home, they talked about things openly, they laid it all on the table, and now you get into a marriage and the two of you are just butting heads because you don't want to deal with it, they want to deal with all of it, and it becomes kind of this idle struggle in the middle of all that. So I think there's a lot of things like that that we bring into adulthood as we grow up, that we've kind of inherited from our families without even knowing it. Yeah. Without even kind of processing through it. So
do you think those are the harder ones to identify, or?
Well, I think
because it can be so, I guess I'm just thinking sometimes it's so innate. You just think this is how it is because that's the culture you grew up in.
Yeah. Well, so if I use that marriage example, I have this kind of illustration that I use with Marriage Matters where I have a suitcase up front and I use different props to show them kind of these things going into marriage, where I have like some cooking utensils and I'll say like, okay, when you grew up, mom cooked everything from scratch. But when you grew up, you guys ordered out a lot. And now you're coming into marriage with two different expectations, and you put that in. Like imagine you're packing your suitcase for your honeymoon is kind of the way I describe it. Another is like screens. How much screen time do you have? You watch TV a lot when you were growing up, but in their household, they limited it. And now you're bringing in two different ideas. And they're not, it's not like good and bad. It's just different. And now you're kind of butting heads. But you come into that relationship with two very different expectations, and you think yours is right. And I think that's kind of how some of this idolatry stuff will play out, is that you don't see it because you do think this is the way that it is. This is the way it should work. And so it's harder to see because you've just grown up in it, or it's been a part of your like subculture in some ways. So I think they are a lot more difficult for us to see compared to what they dealt with back then, where it was a physical idol you could see. Or even in some cultures, I've traveled through Asia on missions, and you see actual carved idols and people bowing to them. I think ours are sneakier because they're buried and underneath all that stuff. And that's I was trying to hit that a little bit with that idea that idols are a heart thing. They're not something we build, something we buy. They're not a physical thing necessarily. It's a matter of how they mess with our hearts more than anything else.
Tim Keller talks about it as like sometimes we think of idols as a desire for something bad, but it's really an over desire for something good. Yeah. Which I think is an interesting way to reframe it. So success, for example, is not a negative thing. It's the over desire. It's when you're making it your God. Yeah. Right. So I also think it's interesting to think about Moses coming down from the mountain. So he finally comes down from the mountain. He's got the 10 Commandments. He's coming down the second time, I guess, with the actual 10 Commandments, since who knows what was on the first. He smashed it. Did they change? I don't know. Was it exactly the same? I don't know. But the second time around, and the first 2 commandments are about idolatry. So I don't know how much God was like, we're going to really clarify this for everybody.
Yeah, were they like in a different order?
I don't know.
And then the first time he's like, start over, go back. And then he's like, let's put these on the top because that's what they're dealing with.
Yeah, these are coming back up to the top here.
I don't think that's what happens.
No, I don't either.
Pretty funny to think about.
It is. So the first 2 are, the first one is you should have no other gods before me. Yeah. And the second being you should make no idols. Yeah. And so it's interesting in context that is exactly where God starts with the 10 Commandments. But then to reference Tim Keller again, he talks about it in the sense that those first 2 are so incredibly important, because if you break 3 through 10, it's all because you've already broken 1 through 2. Yeah. So that when he kind of talks about it in this way of like, he used to think he would sin or struggle with sin, or someone in his congregation would struggle with sin, and he would think, well, yes, because we are sinners. And that is true. Like, we have a sin nature, but then he's like, but that's also pretty kind of defeatist. There's a little bit of like, well, oh shucks, I'm a sinner. He said he began the Lord kind of shifted this thinking in his head of like the question, not just being like, where do I keep sinning, but what idol am I worshiping? And so when he sees in his own life a pattern of sin behavior, the question now for him, or in someone he's pastorally counseling, was to ask, what idol am I serving? Which I think is an interesting way to think about even the 10 Commandments.
It is interesting. Yeah, because they do cascade, right? Like the first 2 cascade into the rest of them. It is really an interesting way to think about what idol am I worshiping that's causing this to be a behavior in my life, rather than just, well, here I am with this behavior again. Yeah. But is there an idol behind the behavior? Yeah. That's an interesting way to think about it. I like that.
I think it's a good question to get at the root of like, why does this keep coming up? There must be something else I'm worshiping other than God. Right. That keeps me a slave to whatever this is.
That actions aren't just actions, behaviors aren't just behaviors. There's always a belief behind them. Right. And so to dig into that belief starts to get at the root of what's really going on. And that's kind of the first step of like destroying them. Yeah. And we talked about this weekend that it's not a matter of minimizing them or managing them. I love that like Moses destroyed this thing in a brutal way. And then,
King just all kinds of stuff, the commandments, the calf.
He's on a roll. Yeah. It was interesting that the smashing of the commandments too, kind of a little side note here. Thinking about, I always wondered, why did he do that? And then he had to go back up and get new ones.
Because they changed.
They didn't. I don't think they changed. but I read in a commentary somewhere that it was, and this was really insightful, was that was a moment where God was showing that even before that covenant was established, a new covenant was needed, that it wasn't good enough already. Mm-hmm. And so it's a precursor to Christ already. It's like, this covenant is not meant to be permanent. Mm-hmm. I never thought about that before. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, this idea that I'm going to give you this law, and it's just going to continue to be a signpost that you can't keep it on your own, and that you're going to need something bigger and better.
Something bigger.
Yeah, to come and keep it for you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is interesting to think about how it happens immediately.
Yeah.
Right? Like before it's even fully
He doesn't even read it to them.
Yeah.
They don't even get to see it.
Yeah.
Immediately, the new covenant is smashed
really
on the ground.
stamping that idea. And like immediately kind of like, you're not going to be able to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. But then back to that idea, like Moses, like grinding that calf into dust and making them drink it. Just, he obliterated it. And so I think that's our temptation too. I think of Josiah. I think I mentioned this in a couple of the sermons about Josiah, King Josiah, finding the copy of the book of the law and going throughout the land and grabbing the idols and grinding them up into powder and then spreading them on the graves of people that worship those idols.
I didn't realize this was like a motif in scripture. Are there like the
destroying? Yeah. So when someone, idols. At least in the Old Testament, when somebody is serious about ridding themselves or the people that they love of idols, they don't just minimize them. They don't manage them. They don't
throw them in a dumpster somewhere.
Yeah.
For someone else
Moses
to pick
didn't say take that calf out of the camp. Don't throw a sheet over it. He was like, no. He ground it up. He destroyed it. He burned it to powder.
Yeah.
And then he made him drink it, which is really weird. But yeah.
Well, okay, let's talk about idols being destroyed. And actually, we have a listener question this week. So I wanted to read that to you. It says, this person writes in, for those people desiring a relationship marriage, how do you replace this idol? Like, how do you replace greed? Like, how you replace greed with generosity? What replaces the want for a relationship? And then kind of part two to that question is also, how do you know if if what you are desiring is a desire God has placed on your heart or an idol that you've created for yourself?
Yeah. So I think first, a desire for marriage is a holy desire. The desire is not bad. I wouldn't even say a desire for marriage is inherently an idol in and of itself, right? Like the idea of the example she gave there was of greed, of swapping greed for one thing. It's not, because greed is sin.
Yeah.
It is an idol, and so we can swap it out. But I don't think that a desire for relationship, a desire for marriage is inherently evil in the first place. So just to kind of lay that down, I think what happens is the idea of saying, I want this thing in my life can be a healthy thing if it's a holy thing like marriage. But the idea of saying, I need this thing in my life to complete who I am and make me whole, then that's when it starts to get on that idol territory. And that's where you have to be careful. So I use the example in my own life of how much I desired to have marriage and have a family and kind of build what I didn't have as a kid. And then I had that older man make that statement where he said, you're ready to be married when you're ready to be alone for the rest of your life. And I think that's kind of hitting on what they're asking there, is this idea that you have to be complete in Christ first. Because if not, then you go into that marriage and you end up piling things onto your spouse that they were never meant to carry through life. And it's not fair to them. It'll always leave you empty. And so marriage in and of itself, that desire, that is not an idol, but like how you treat it can become an idol to the degree that you feel like this will be the thing that will finally fill the ache that I have in my life. That's where you have to be really careful. So my recommendation for folks, because I've talked to a lot of people to this end before, is to not treat this time as when will I get what I want, but treat it more like who am I supposed to become as I wait? Because God uses waiting so much and so richly to develop us into the right people. And I think sometimes we don't have whatever blessing it may be in our life just yet because we're not ready to handle it. We're not the right person. I, again, kind of hit on that a little bit this weekend, that we can take the blessings that God gives us and turn them against him. He blessed Israel on the way out of Egypt with all this gold, and they turned it into a calf against him. And so for you to receive that blessing too early might not be the right thing. He might be trying to develop some character in you to get you ready to receive it.
Yeah. And so how do you think about that and maybe it goes to this next question. What if that blessing or thing that you hope for, that is a good thing, doesn't come your way? Is it that you haven't waited long enough? How do you know when to just like trust that what the Lord has for you is still good, even if that one thing you were hoping for doesn't come to fruition? Like you can't guarantee that a marriage is going to happen if you wait long enough or well enough, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of goes back to, I guess, the question of, can God even still be above that? As much as you want and desire a good thing, God needs to be bigger in your life than that. Is that how you think about that? Or how would you?
Yeah. I mean, I think that you need to be able to evaluate, well, what is this desire communicating to me? Like, what is it in this desire that I want? What do I feel like I'm missing?
Mm-hmm.
Is it intimacy in the sense that somebody knows me? Then in that case, God knows you better than you know yourself. I think in Matthew, where he talks about how he knows all the hairs on your head and how much he cares for you, right? Is it community? Is it like somebody to come alongside of you, like a person, not just God? Well, then how do you explore friendship inside of the church, inside of the community that he's given to us? And so there's a lot of different ways to kind of play that out. But I think that that's what it is that you have to find fulfillment in him and what he provides, because if not, then you try to put that on the other person. And that's where it becomes heavy on them, unfair to them, lopsided for you. So yeah, ultimately that's where it was for me. So I realized, like, telling that story, it's different because a few months later, I meet my wife, we get married, we have 4 kids, we're way down the road now.
Yeah, it's kind of easy if that happened.
Yeah, but for some folks, for him to say that statement to me, and I remember clearly, like, where I had a moment, just kind of sitting quiet, sitting with God and saying, okay, I'm good if this is all I get. If all I get for the rest of my life is you, that's enough. That's all I need. And then it's kind of like that idea in Matthew, Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus talks about seek first his kingdom and everything gets added to you. It's like, if we seek first a relationship with him to find all of our fulfillment in him, then he begins to add things to us that add value, but they're not like the central source of where we get our value. Yeah. So just to be complete in him is, I think, the idea behind that guy's statement to me that was so meaningful to me.
Yeah. And I think maybe this is a good place for us to even land our time. I think that you talked about, really, to break our idols, a big part of it is to taste and see that the Lord is good. And you kind of gave 2 wings to that. One, the sense of like experiencing God and knowing that he's good. And then the other part is kind of a little bit more of a tangible action of like, so replacing things. So if you gave the example of, if anxiety is like an idol in your life, then take some tangible steps of signing off of social media or taking away things that are feeding that anxiety. I think probably it's easy for a listener, or for me even, to hear that and think, okay, cool. The replacement part makes sense. That feels like a tangible action I can work towards this week. Maybe the piece that could get missed in that at the end there is the taste and see that the Lord is good, and really the cultivation of a deeper intimacy with Christ, because I think sometimes that feels a little less tangible. How do I do that? So what advice would you have for us in cultivating that deeper relationship with Christ and that intimacy with him, so that the intimacy with him is my number one priority, and everything else kind of feels like a blessing or bonus, and not the God, like a small God, a non-God in comparison to God.
I think, so I had said this in, again, one of the versions of the sermon. I did it 4 times, so I keep saying that, but it's like sometimes it takes on a life of its own. This idea that a lot of times in Western Christianity, we think that God is inviting us to believe a set of facts, but what he's actually inviting us to do is to experience him. And so faith is not merely this intellectual exercise. It's an invitation to taste and see. And so talking about honey, you enjoy honey not by taking pictures of it or measuring it, you taste it, right? That's the big thing about it. And I think that there is this element of, excuse me, there's an element of idolatry worship that we have to be careful of, that we think that, okay, if I have this idol in my life, I need to be like Moses, I have to destroy this thing. And so it's a lot of like, well, what are the 5 steps I need to do to destroy this thing?
Yeah.
And it comes very practical. It comes very, just a list of things to do.
Yeah.
But there is an element all through Scripture that talks about when you rid yourself of something evil, you've got to backfill it with something that is good. And so the goodness part of that is the experience part. It is just spending time with him. We talked earlier about those 3 pieces of glass. I think those 3 pieces of glass also keep us from having a deeper relationship with Christ, because we're not willing to put down the phone, turn off the TV, do that kind of stuff, and actually spend time in his word, or spend time in prayer, or spend time in prayer where it's not just us talking the whole time, but for us to listen to him. Because I think that when, at least for me in my own experience, that's some of my richest time with him, is when I'm not saying anything, because it gives him room to say things to me, things that are true, that kind of help break the lies that make me want to believe in idols, things that are like really beautiful, that by comparison, idols are nothing compared to what he has to say to me. So I think that that's the big thing for me, is just being able to spend some time with him, to sit down the things that are distracting, and just allow him to have some space. But you have to backfill it. So I have this passage. I wasn't even necessarily going to think about this, or bring this up, but I have this passage that I have been kind of wrestling with a little bit. It's a weird one, but if I could throw it out here at the end. So it's Jesus. It's in Matthew 12. And he says this. He says, when the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through waterless places, seeking rest, but finds none. Then it says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when it comes, it finds the house empty, swept, and put in order. And then it goes out and brings with it 7 other spirits more evil than itself. And they will enter and dwell there. And the last state of the person is worse than the first. So it seems like a weird thing for him to say, but essentially he's talking about when we rid our lives of something evil, like that's a win, but if we're not careful, something else can come in and take its place. So in relation to idols, if we get rid of the idol of greed and we start to become generous people, that's great, but then maybe the idol of pride sneaks in, because like, look how good I am. I'm starting to give this thing away, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not enough to just rid our lives of evil things or of idols. We have to backfill it with God and his goodness. And I think that's what Jesus is talking about here. It's not enough to just like get rid of it, try to sweep, do your best effort, clean up the house, because other things will sneak in if you don't put him at the center of all that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think I loved at the end of your sermon how you tied in this idea, this very weird idea of Moses grinding up the idol and making them drink it, with Christ taking the cup of bitterness for us. And I just think how deeply he wants us. He wants to be known by us, and he wants us to, he wants to know us, to know him even deeper than like we could imagine. And so when we are like seeking him, we will find him. And so this idea of like, there is an element of really cultivating a prayer life that just desires to know him and experience him, and to tell him that, and allow him to grow that in you, I think. Yeah.
I think we struggle with that intimacy, that prayer, because we feel like prayer has to be so structured and formal. And there's a piece of that that's helpful at times, but sometimes it is just a matter of just spending time with him. Like I think of my own kids and how much at certain times, like I'll notice just based on the attention that they're like when they're little wanting to give, like, oh, they just want to spend time with me. That's all that they want right now. And so I'm going to drop everything and spend time with them. Right. That's what he wants. He just wants us to spend time with him, to experience him, to see that kind of stuff, to see and taste his goodness. Yeah.
It's a great word, John. Thanks for being here on the podcast.
Thanks
Great to talk to you as always.